Welcome everybody to this breakout session at the 5th annual Diversity Project event. The focus of this breakout session is on male allyship, why it's important, and to help to think about how we can become better allies, both men and women, and how our organisations can make progress in embedding this idea of male allyship within their firms and within their employee base. I will hand over to Mark to introduce this session and to touch on some of the topics that we'll be discussing, and then Janine will also contribute to that discussion as well. And Janine, Mark, and myself make up three of I think an 8-strong working group from right across the industry, looking at how we can help our member firms at the Diversity Project to address and understand male allyship within their organisations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cosmo. Thank you. So the agenda for the next half hour, or just less than half an hour, let's think about diversity and inclusion. Let's think about being the only one in the room. Let's think about the personal case for inclusion, the what's in it for me as a man. Let's also recognise our male relative advantage and think about the lived experiences and their consequences of those women and other people from underrepresented groups that we work with. And then if we have time at the end, let's think about the actions that we can take to become better allies. But to warm things up, get us warmed up, think about it. Think about a time when you were the only one in the room. Maybe the only Manchester United fan or the only Chelsea fan in a room, or you were the only Scotsman or the only Englishman in the room. You were different from everybody else in that room. How did you feel? How did you react? What would have you done if somebody else had walked into that room with the same characteristics as you? And let's not forget, as white men in this room, that our female colleagues and those colleagues from other underrepresented groups experience this being the only one in the room, on a regular, sometimes even daily basis. And let's understand then the privilege that gives us, the relative advantage that gives us of being in the majority group. And let's also think then about how our behaviours, sometimes accidental, more often than not accidental, actually affect those people in that minority group or those minority groups, those underrepresented groups. So to start off, if that wasn't enough, I want to do a little bit of a wake-up call here. Earlier on in today's event, I think Helena shared some statistics about how we in the investment and savings industry are progressing. And it's a stark reminder that maybe we're not progressing as quickly as we should, despite the rhetoric. So on average, our mean bonus gap is still 50p in the pound. So the average woman in our industry still only earns 50p for the pound that the average man earns. That's closed in 4 years from 44 pence. So we are making progress, but very slowly. We then look at the pay gap, the average pay gap. So women in our industry still only earn 72 pence for every pound that a man earns. And that's only closing at a penny a year. And still our firms, the top quartile, the highest earners in our firms are still predominantly men. And at current rates of progress, it's going to be well after I'm dead that starts to change in most firms. And indeed, in 35% of firms, we've gone backwards over the last 4 years. So there are fewer women working in top quartile earning roles in our industry in 2020 than there were in 2017. When I look at these figures, apart from thinking we've got to do something about that, when I look at the reports that accompany our gender pay gap stats, when I look at people's websites, when they say what they're doing, 99% of the focus has been on supporting, when we're talking about gender stats, women to succeed. We coach them, we mentor them, we help them succeed, but usually in our world, we want to recruit more of them and retain more of them into our world. And our thought is that very little has been done about harnessing the potential of the vast majority of people in our industry, the men in our industry. Will more men stepping up to inclusion and leveling the playing field accelerate this progress? Can we get to the point where we stop talking about this if we get more men with their relative advantage and their power active supporters of D&I initiatives? Janine's now.
Mark.
Sorry, Janine, go on.
No, I was going to say thank you, but yeah, thank you for your opening. Very powerful. What I want to do is really look at the role of an ally. But before I do that, I wanted to just define what a male ally is, which is a question that a lot of the men in my network ask me. So if your company has the objective to attract, develop, and retain female talent, which I hope it does, then a male ally is a man who is committed to doing that and recognizes that they have an important role to play in achieving gender diversity. So what is the role of a male ally? Well, it's to be a visible agent of change. And simply put, it starts from the top. When leaders act, it encourages others to do the same. Being aware is another important part. Lack of awareness can keep well-intentioned men on the sidelines rather than serving as effective advocates and accomplices of change. Awareness, which is a key element of gender intelligence, believe it or not, there is a thing called GQ, involves being aware of your own mistakes by inviting others to call them out politely, being aware of non-inclusive behaviors and trying to address those in real time, being aware of those who are being excluded and acting in solidarity and partnership with them. And then finally, to cover off the last point on this slide, making sure that you understand that everyone can make mistakes, but having an honest humility and a perpetual learning orientation, which is focused on asking questions, listening, and adapting, is what defines the role of an ally. Over to you, Mark.
Janine, thank you. So in our work, we've identified 3 ally personas, can we call them, 3 types of ally. I'm going to present persona 1. Janine is going to present persona 2, and Cosmo persona 3. Our first ally is somebody who's supportive, but he's doing what is asked of him. He maybe understands the business case and he wants to be a good employee. He wants to meet his objectives and his targets, and is keen to do so, but is doing it for usually those reasons alone. Those are his motivations. And that ally in this persona has a very different mindset from the two that are going to follow. So he'll quite often claim that his team are already diverse. They're close-knit and good mates, that everybody has equal rights and equal opportunities. He may know that he has some biases, but doesn't everybody. But he'll do everything he can to meet his objectives. This type of ally is also quite often worried and reluctant to speak out, to say the wrong thing. He's concerned and reluctant to really take that next bold step into becoming a great ally. Janine.
So persona 2 is a well-intentioned man who is aware of the challenges faced by his partner, daughter, or anyone close to them. And this is what motivates them to act. They have the humility, which I mentioned earlier, and therefore recognize that they're not perfect and occasionally fall foul of accidental sexism. They take action by helping women through championing, mentoring, and training. And when they're recruiting, they are conscious about having a diverse candidate pool and are very supportive of their company's gender network. Cosmo?
Thanks, Janine. And so on to the third gender ally persona. And for me, this one really speaks to the role of an ally that Janine has already spoken to us about, becoming a visible agent of change. This is for me, what we should all aspire to be. This is the persona that we should all aspire to be, and with an understanding that actually, ultimately, the outcome of men coming together and acting as allies means that they're a better. It's a better place to work for everyone, both men and women. And so it's a recognition that while a male ally can work to make a working environment more inclusive for all, including underrepresented groups, it's actually a recognition that it can also make a working environment better for men as well. And I think that's the piece that's really missing and that we really want to unlock. It's also a recognition that as a man, especially a white man, we are part of the vast majority of certainly the investment and savings industry and many industries across the financial sector. And by acting together, we can actually create a critical mass of people who can drive change, and that can only come if a majority of men are involved in this conversation. So we need to get there. And perhaps last, just to talk about the actions. One of the most important being the having the sort of being brave enough to call out poor behaviors, and also taking feedback when you get called out as well, and not becoming defensive. So yeah, just to reiterate, I think this is what all men should aspire to be, and I hope that we can set out some actions today for more men to fulfill this role as an agent of change. So over to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit about. Over to Janine, I think, is going to talk a little bit about what impact do each of these personas have, and I think this is a really important point to make.
Yeah, and when we were putting these slides together, Cosmo, Mark, and I spoke at length about the differences between the personas. we've just discussed, and their personal impact both internally as well as externally. And what I've tried to do is depict it in a very, very simple matrix, looking at the personal impact they have, both external and internal. And persona 1, by ticking all the boxes, may well feel like he's doing the right thing, but he has little impact externally. He's not really moving the dial through his actions. Whereas persona 3 is making that difference and creating change around them.
Thank you. Just to summarize that, if we can, and just to think about it, if persona 1 is doing this because he's trying to be a good employee, because he understands the business case, persona 2 is doing this because there's a little bit more of a personal reason, an external personal reason. How often have you heard men say, I'm doing this because I've got a daughter, or because, I understand the challenges my career wife has gone through. But what's different about persona 3 we've seen is that this man is saying, actually, I understand the what's in it for me. As a consequence, you get a very different set of actions. Actions that are more impactful, as Janine has said. So what is it? What are we talking about when we say the what's in it for me? And we've got this diagram here, which is showing the 4 pillars or the 4 quadrants of the what's in it for me. The first thing is to talk about career. And we're not just talking about career here, we're talking about workplace. I don't know very many people who want to work in an environment where our ideas can't be heard. I don't know very many people who want to work in an environment where we're not credited for the work that we do, where we don't get promoted on merit. I'm of an age where, I remember the workplaces of the 70s and 80s. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want my son to work in those, let alone my daughter. There's a lot more opportunity for us in those environments to succeed and flourish. And because they are diverse, they're more interesting, exciting places to work in. So from a career perspective, this is important. Research has also shown that diverse and inclusive workplaces and cultures give us men better health and well-being outcomes. So less mental health issues, better mental well-being, less small physical illnesses, back pains, little niggles here and there. So, it's good for us from our health perspective. But one of the big ones for me is opportunity and choice. Do we want to wind the clock back to the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s? How far do we want to wind it back? We don't, of course. But let's think about the man in the 50s, the stereotype, the social norms that he had to comply with, the glass ceilings that were around him, maybe because of his upbringing or the school he went to. Today, as men, we've got so much more opportunity to bring ourselves to work, to bring ourselves and be ourselves in society. We can choose if we want to be stay-at-home dads. We can choose to be openly gay. We can choose, much more so now than ever before, our careers and the type of relationship we want with our life partners. This is all down to, or a lot of this is down to, diversity and inclusion and changes in society, more and more inclusive society. You may now be asking, well, what does responsibility mean? Well, I think we have a great responsibility here as men, and particularly as white men. Over the years, ever since the suffragettes, people from underrepresented groups have fought for their rights and changing in societal norms. As white men, relatively speaking, most of us have done nothing to get the benefits we've already talked about. So it's about time that we stood up. We thought about our relative advantage and the power we have within our firms to drive this change. We need to get on the bus, get in the car and start joining forces with the women and other people from underrepresented groups in our industry to drive this change, to put this to bed once and for all. Cosmo.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's a pretty powerful message, the personal case for inclusion. And the light's gone out. I guess this is something that I've been thinking about more and more recently. I've been involved now in the diversity project for about 4.5 years, and have been sort of working on the side of my desk to contribute to the gender sort of balance initiatives as part of the diversity project. And then internally within my own company, Legal and General Investment Management, I've been once again involved in the gender committee, the gender balance committee, but also more widely in other inclusion and diversity initiatives. And I didn't set out necessarily because I thought it was going to ultimately benefit me professionally and personally. But if I take a big step back and think about how I have, I guess, developed over that period, I honestly say that both professionally and personally, I have grown more than I probably could have imagined. And I'm almost certain that a big part of that has been down to, firstly, working with and engaging with people from right across the business and from different backgrounds, many of whom I wouldn't have come into contact with in my day job for obvious reasons. And we all know that there's a especially in big firms, there's only a certain reach that you have within a firm on a day-to-day basis, and only certain teams that you actually interact with. Often those teams may look and feel just like your team, but through engaging in diversity and inclusion discussions, events, roundtables, workshops, you name it, you naturally meet a much more interesting cross-section of people from your organization. So that's been one benefit, because suddenly the day job, when you do need to speak to those people, becomes easier because you know them, you have relationships with them. But I guess also by contributing to some of the initiatives that we have been really pushing for, focused around how do you create a level playing field, how do you create a working environment where anyone can flourish. Well, I've been able to flourish in that environment as well. I feel that opportunities have definitely come way. I've been able to make choices with respect to my career, and that has, to Mark's point, definitely come from a feeling that within any organization there shouldn't be barriers between investments and distribution and operations. You really should be able to allow people to try different things, move from one team to another, see what it's like, see if that suits your skill set, and that's something that I've been able to benefit from, definitely. So I just wanted to share my personal story, because I am becoming much more aware that just how much it's benefited me.
Cosmo, thank you. So I'm conscious of the time here, and we need to finish on time. The next couple of slides are really about what we can do and what we're doing. First of all, this word accidental sexism. I think everybody in society, men, women, are blind to some of their advantages, some of their privilege, their relative advantage. And as a consequence of that blindness, we all exhibit some level of accidental sexism. And that's derived from deeply ingrained social expectations of the different genders. But as white men, our accidental sexisms are barriers to equality of opportunity for those from underrepresented groups within our firms. Things that we do, even the most well-intentioned managers can reinforce barriers for women's progression without actually realizing what they're doing. And it's invisible to us. Through the research that my colleague at Men for Inclusion, Jill Armstrong, did at Cambridge University, we've got a large number of and data around this. But the other thing that we've done, and Jill has done, is define those accidental sexisms as the 5 C's, which Janine is now going to cover.
I feel like a bit of a fraud covering Jill's work, but the 5 C's, the first C stands for capability, and it's where there is an unfair allocation of prestigious work, which means that women don't get the opportunity to prove themselves and end up doing the office housework and are, as a result, less likely to progress according to their potential. The second one stands for constraint, and this is where a woman's competence is questioned and where well-meaning decisions are made on their behalf without any prior discussion with them. And I'll be honest, I've been party to that. The third one is communication, which is where women are talked over or not given the opportunity to get their points across. We've been in many meetings before where a woman makes a point and it's ignored, but then their male colleague would make the same point and suddenly it's heard. This makes women feel disrespected and undervalued. The fourth one is credit, which is where women are not credited appropriately for their contribution, or worse still, they're thought to owe positions due to diversity targets. That is a very big insult. And the final one is for connections. This is where effectively the assumption that most women are not very well networked, and that leads to a lack of sponsorship, therefore hindering their career progression. And I think that's where we're ending this session, but I'll pass over to Cosmo.
Thanks, Janine, and thanks, Mark. I hope that this has been a really engaging discussion, and I think a number of the points raised certainly raise eyebrows. But for us, we set out launching this male allyship working group as part of the diversity project to ultimately help our member firms. And so, how are we doing that? Well, we're in the process of working on a toolkit which we will share shortly with all of you, which really the aim being to help firms put in place frameworks for addressing male allyship within their organizations, whether that is the actions that they can take, the order in which you can take those actions, the resources and firms out there that can help you on the journey, and how do you engage key stakeholders internally and across your organization. So we really want that to be a practical guide. We understand that one size doesn't fit all, but please look out for it. Please share it within your organizations, and if you want us to come in to have a discussion to go through it in more detail, then we'll be really happy to do that. But thanks everybody for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.